Okay. Good morning. This is good afternoon? All right, good afternoon. I'm just trying not to rush the day. It's a regular meeting of the Village Energy Task Force, Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. And I call the meeting to order. Is there media in the room? Apparently not. Okay. And I'm looking for a motion on the agenda.
I move to accept the agenda.
Okay. Second. And all those in agreement, please raise your hand. Thank you. Approval of the meeting report for January the 10th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Or any? Okay. And a vote? All those in favor? Okay. We're moving along rapidly. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit about the agenda because we're going to make some changes. At least I recommend it. First of all, our guest speaker will be here in a few minutes, and I'd like to not waste his time by having him all the way down in the area of reports 13. I'm going to move that up, and as soon as he gets here, I think we'll give him the floor, okay, and let him make his presentation. And afterward, there can be questions. In the meantime, I'm going to withhold Chairman's remarks until after the presentation. Okay. So we can start anyway. Do we have any member comments that we can move on to and then double back?
Yes, we have two for item number 6, and the first person is LaRue in 521C. Lauren, maybe. Lauren in 521C.
Hi there. A couple of quick comments on things that are not really on the agenda, or kind of are. I have to say, when I came back from my summer in Oregon, I was disappointed that the task force wasn't meeting in November, because I come back a little early. And I was told by people who were well informed that it was sort of out of business. And so I was clueless enough not to notice in January that there was a meeting. I did see Bert giving a report at the disaster preparedness, and so I thought, well, maybe there's still something going on. So I actually looked at the YouTube, and all 4 hours, and I'm very gratified that, this first point, that this group continues, because I don't think there's any substitute for it, sort of at the level of single mutuals kind of doing their own thing, or GRF doing its own thing. So I think at least as a place to exchange information, this is really a valuable thing for the community to have. Two other quick points. I think there are lots of things coming down the road in the future related to climate and energy systems that are going to work their way onto this agenda. And I think it's important that we can't deal with them all now, and we can't deal with them all in the short term, but there are things that we're going to have to think about in terms of the state's move to decarbonize, get all of the carbon out of the energy system, to electrify all energy end uses, and to do this and rely completely on solar and wind and a few other renewables. To do that is going to create a system that can be very precarious. And if you add wildfires and de-energizing parts of the system, like they did in Northern California last year, into it, you get a much less stable kind of a system than we've had traditionally. And so I think that's something that you're looking at in terms of microgrid, but it's also going to be a really important facet of life and a stark reality for 18,000 plus residents of Laguna Woods Village, I think, because we're sort of all on our own under those circumstances and not very well equipped to deal with it. I've been doing energy research and policy and programs for 30 plus years and focusing basically on people and how they interact with technologies. And we know very, very little about how people use energy in the village. There's very little in the policy arena for support for multifamily, for Edison, or through the Public Utilities Commission on energy efficiency and renewables. So at any rate, I think we've got a lot of work cut out for us in the future, and I hope that there are ways for some of those issues to work their way onto this agenda. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your comments.
Lauren. The next speaker is Larry Proctor.
So I'm at similar lines, but kind of a little more immediate. So we moved to the village in June, and we own a unit in a sixplex on Paseo del Lago. We have a separate garage, very spacious, but we want to buy a Tesla. So, we went through the steps. We went to the alterations department, got the information, contacted a local electrician in Lake Forest who's done work in the community and also installs fast chargers. And it's just a bit of you almost have to have a home charging solution. The people that buy Teslas and end up selling them back are people that rely strictly on the public network, and it's just not good. So we're looking for a home charging solution. And, and it's not clear cut what that solution might be. So I really, I was hoping to find something that's a little bit more of a kind of a playbook for someone who wants to do this. Putting a fast charger in, you need 50 amps of power capacity available. And most of us probably are on 100 amp panels. Our boxes are full. We're fully electric. We're using what we have, but we don't have more. So they recommend installing, if you want to go that route, putting 200 amp panels in, changing out your board, that's money, work. It's doable and maybe smart to do it, given the comments he just made, and I think the things we know are coming. But anyway, I'm just not sure if that's what the community wants, if that's the plan. You can also, given our kind of driving patterns, we drive about 25 miles on our average day if you don't include road trips. We could probably do it on the trickle charger, the one that comes with the car. And maybe over 9 to 10 hours overnight, we could just charge. But I'm also understanding in an older environment like ours, older construction, you should have a licensed electrician come out and inspect to make sure that, it's safe. So anyway, I'm just curious and what the plans are, what we all want to do.
I would say that you're probably one of the lucky people. I assume you have a washing machine or dryer.
Washing machine, dryer, range,
Okay, which is
microwave.
240-volt outlet.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, in the garage.
In the garage. What we think we do, there's a 110, and there's something else that's been kind of plugged up. He didn't open that up.
I have had Teslas for 3 years. Okay, I still have electric vehicles, not a Tesla.
Okay.
And I got a cord that plugs into the 240-volt outlet, and I use it to charge my cars.
Okay.
Okay, and basically I'm at a level 2. I'm drawing those, I think, 30 amps. So
Okay.
I'm getting about 16 miles charge for every
Now,
hour.
I see.
So I can plug in and overnight fully charge my car.
Got it.
So you could basically look at the same thing. That cable would cost about, what, Steve, $200? Yeah, about 200, yeah.
Do you recommend that they said, have I guess the electrician come out and do that work, so they'd have to put it in and stuff like that. We would need to go through alterations for any of that
No,
stuff?
just match your outlet with the
Okay.
plug. You can buy an adapter if the cable doesn't match it, and that's it. You'd be off and running.
Okay. I mean, just a general case. I'm sure there's a plan. We're lucky.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are many people that aren't so lucky.
Right.
So I don't
Yeah.
know what the
People
plan
that do not have garages have a problem, and that's something that we're trying to address, or we're trying to address.
is. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Juanita Skillman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I just wanted to speak in favor of looking more at the microgrid. I watched 60 Minutes on Sunday, and they had a wonderful segment on microgrids that are going to be, if you will, the savior of Puerto Rico. With all of the hurricanes and the problems that they have, and the lines go down, and there's no electricity, and blah, 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 they've been able to figure out how to do this with a microgrid. But they had a wonderful segment of their program. I'm sure you can get it on YouTube or one of the other stations and replay it. And if you're not real sure of what the microgrids are and can do and whatever, it worked out well. I don't want to step on the toes of who I think will be the next speaker, but I also noticed that on this day, Catherine was on and talking about El Toro water and the sewer that we have and how they are interrelated with the electricity. They don't run if the electricity doesn't run. So SCE cuts off our electricity. It also cuts off our ability to get water and sewage. So she probably will speak more on that. But I had never put those two together. The utilities are all interrelated. And when we depend on everything for SCE, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. So there are other sources out there.
Thank you, Juanita. I think that program will also be on YouTube. People want to watch it if you've missed it. So you can go onto YouTube and go to 60 Minutes and watch that segment. I saw that the other night, too. Excellent piece.
Real eye-opener.
Yeah.
The next speaker is Catherine Freshley.
Welcome, Catherine.
After the first speaker, I just thought I'd comment, because I was on TV6 Friday morning talking about PSPS, which is Power Safety Power Shutoff, which the legislature passed this past year. And one of the things that really for all the utilities, and the water district particularly, we've got something like 18 pump stations, so we have to pump the sewage, and we have to pump water. And if we don't have power, then we got a problem. So part of what we're really investigating, and we'll be working with SCE. In our case, taking a look at the environment in the whole district, all the way up to the 241, our risk relative to other water districts is really quite low. We have Laguna Canyon, but the winds traditionally, or typically, are going toward the ocean when it's very dry. And the previous fire was back in 1993, as you know, and it went over the hill and all the way nearly to the ocean. That typically is not going to come in our direction. Now, the water district, because we're up near the 241, we have a lot of open areas there. Here locally, we're very urban. So the probability is really fairly low that there would be any need for Southern California Edison to cut the power. But as a water district, we're looking at what we're going to do to be able to run our pumps for at least 4 days without power if we need to. We're actually going to try to stretch ourselves because I'm more concerned with the grid and to have at least 10 minutes or 10 days if we can. We're looking at trying to stretch just in an emergency, because if you don't have water and we're, and we don't have, and we're not pumping the sewage, we're going to, it becomes a real health risk. So we're seriously looking at that. Relative to this community, my own approach with the water district was we're going to sit down with Southern California Edison and really determine if they're going to have to do any isolation, where are they isolating, so that we are well aware then of what we need in order to cope. And I think if you're going to be looking at, some kind of network or something like this, you really got to sit down and say, okay, what is the probability that we're going to have the power shut off? And I think here in our area, personally, it's fairly low. If we were up in West LA or we're up in Santa Clarita, up in that area, I'd say it's really quite high. Now, one of the things that's being done cooperatively with the government for the power for the utilities, and it's working for us as a water district, is we're beginning to get a classification that people will know ahead of what is the risk of fires. Like hurricanes, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In the process of developing a system for fires will be 1, 2, 3, 4. And that'll be based on, with satellites, we're now measuring the moisture content of the landscaping, of all the vegetation and things like this. Southern California Edison has something like 1,500 weather stations. They're continually now monitoring and setting up to monitor the moisture that is available in the land. And so that they will be able to start giving us a notice if there's a risk of fire 2 days ahead, and they'll be able to classify it as a class 1 risk, class 2 risk, class 3 risk, or class 4 risk. If it gets up to class 4 and you happen to be in an area that they have to shut down, we will know ahead. But my own opinion is, I don't think in this area we would be class 4. So, but there's so much work going on now, so we just want to, I'm just trying to educate everybody. It's, you know, it is something that we're having to face, but we're also working on using technology to help us to make logical decisions. Thank you.
Nice to know, Catherine. Thank you very much.
Catherine, a question for you before you go.
Yeah.
In walking around Laguna Woods, I noticed there are some very large water tanks. Access to that water during a power shutoff, is that available to the community?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
We keep
would it be
those-
gravity?
Actually, if in a power shutoff, okay, we will have standby generators. If we're having to shut down, every place that we have to be moving water from, we will have pumps and we'll have the backup storage.
Got it.
We already have actually as a water district, we're far ahead of some of the other water districts. We do have diesel generating generators at almost every one of our wells and pumping stations.
Well, those tanks, because they're on hillsides that I've seen, they wouldn't gravity feed then.
They do gravity.
They are
feed.
gravity.
Okay.
Yeah, we use it for pressurization.
So basically,
Absolutely.
once they ran out, is what you're talking about, replenishing the water.
That's right.
But we would have access to water for a day or two if we had to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
We have the
All
big
right.
water tanks, but we use that to pressurize the lines. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's it?
There are no member comments at this time.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to move the presentation by Gene Oakham up to this time. So I see that Gene has arrived, thank goodness. Welcome. Thank you. If you want, yes.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time today.
Can you give us a little background?
Sure. How long do I have, by the way, so I know?
15, 20 minutes? Is that enough?
Yeah, that'll work. Get it done in 15. Okay. So I appreciate your time today. I'm with Solar Optimum. Solar Optimum is a solar energy provider. We've been around for 13 years, developing solar energy and energy storage in Los Angeles and here in California. We currently are operating throughout the state, and we provide services not only directly like this, where we do energy services, design, engineering, and installation, but we also provide installation for other developers that are doing their projects and they need some of our expertise. Our past history here is that we were involved with another large manufacturing company who was trying to figure out how to put solar here, and we assisted them in doing so in the installation process. Today, I think the purpose of the meeting is to discuss resiliency and how we can deal with issues like we were just discussing and Catherine was talking about, pumping water and sewage. I guess I'd like to start with some questions. Is there a emergency plan in place here? Do we have a long-term plan, something more than a week or more than that? What's in place now?
There is a disaster task force that has looked at the problem, and they've identified certain buildings where they will certainly require power. The real issue, which I have not seen a solution for, is those people that are on life support and are handicapped. Just may indeed be a problem for particularly an elderly community like ours.
When the task force looks at a disaster, how do they look at that? Are they looking at it in like, let's say an earthquake, how you deal with a month, or what in terms of timeline?
They basically have used earthquakes as the basis for their planning.
Okay, very good. So today, what I want to talk a little bit about is using the facilities that you have as emergency disaster centers. These would be the facilities that have the swimming pools and all of your community centers. I believe that looking at microgrids throughout your facilities would help provide a lot of the relief and issues that you might find over these long-term concerns, and those being also not just 24 or 48 hours. I think really we're looking at longer than a month. I would ask the question, I do a lot of work on quite a number of microgrids. I've been getting a number of calls from PG&E in those territories. They've been shutting people down from the winds for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Generators are running out. If you're running a generator, which is great, but what happens if there's an earthquake and they cannot get diesel to the site? What do you do then? So the military is looking at this as well. We're working on solutions with them. I believe a good solution, or at least interim step, is really discussing how we interlace an emergency disaster centers into your existing emergency and your plans that you have now. And the reason I refer to these little centers as a center is certainly when things go wrong, individuals, not just life support, but could be other things like food and other necessities that they need, even medical care. I mean, what's going on now is very interesting. I'm sure you're aware of the news, but certainly things could change very quickly here in relation to medical centers and needs, especially for elderly. So, in relations to the power, I would say to everybody, how long is your water supply? How long can your food last in your refrigerators? And I have a presentation, but I think it'll take longer than the time allotted, so we can share some of that if you'd like. But I'm concerned about the time, so I'd rather just talk about it, and I think I can
I
provide.
think we're willing to give you whatever time it's going to take to educate ourselves.
Okay.
You have a presentation.
It's a little it's a little complicated than just kind of a 15-minute run, is
A
what.
lot of people can be visual out here while
Okay.
you're talking to us.
How do I plug in? I can plug in here, yeah? Okay, very good. One second. Sorry, Tito. I'm always concerned about time. All right.
Sue, do you want to come up and fill in for Brian? Well, Carl as well, yeah.
Okay, some of these might take us some time, so I'm going to move very quickly through a couple of them. But I guess where I was going with this was essentially a disaster plan. I know you have one. You have it sounds like a whole group of people have planned for the worst, which is a good thing. I just want to go through a process with you, which may help. So some of the things we're talking about are water and issues. There's a lot of other issues on power. Where are you going to get power? What are you going to do? What are you going to do for food? These are all things that can happen in a state of emergency, and even the best laid plans sometimes are not enough. So the consideration is what happens when everybody runs to the store? Are we ready? And how do we deal with some of these larger issues that could face us in the future? And I'm not referring to something like a 24-hour blackout, although I will say the costs incurred to run a diesel engine on a number of fire departments, which I'm working with right now, is so prohibitive. It's unbelievable how much it costs them to run those things over time, especially if you're trying to rent them to add more power to things. Some of the other issues we talked about, somebody owns electric cars. Those probably won't work too well if we're not making power. If you use it for primary, what do? You mentioned emergency systems, people that are on life support, compressors, that's fine if it runs on electricity. How long can it run? If you're running diesels to back up the buildings, how long will those run? So those are the things we think about and how we solve those problems. Some other issues and how the disruptions are caused, and these are the things I'm sure you've already looked at. Minor ones, those aren't major concern, but microgrids can help with these as well. Those typically are transformers, people running over poles, things like that, short-term issues, utility events. There are a number of those. Utilities are having more and more challenges with the grid. It's an old grid, and they're trying to provide ways to really deal with it. Notably, most is PG&E. They're going through bankruptcy. They're really struggling up there, and you know, SCE could face similar issues in the future. So I think that's something everyone is looking at. Oops. So here's the ones that I'm concerned with. These are really the longer ones, and I think you already know what those are. Some maybe you don't know. There are groups out there right now that are constantly trying to get into our grid and cause damage, and those things could who knows what the length of time that those could cause. So we have a typical process. It's the same whether we're doing solar or a microgrid or a battery, except for in the case of a microgrid where we are doing islanding, the process changes in the fact that it's much more complicated. Now we're actually looking at which buildings do we keep on, which loads do we keep on, which need to stay on. If you make something a community center or a earthquake center or emergency center, if I'm looking at the loads now, but I put in suddenly a bunch of people in there and now the place is full and fully operational for a month or longer, what does that look like? So there's quite a bit more challenge to designing and developing a microgrid. It's not as simple as just drop solar in a battery and everybody is happy about that, or even a diesel engine. It's a process. So our goal, if we're looking at this, I think in holistic approach, is to provide a best-in-class system. And what we're considering on our end, looking at the facilities at a very high level, and this is an overview today, more of a discovery, is really around putting canopy carports in the parking lots, adding charging stations to those, high-speed DC ones, which may resolve some of your issues that you see at your old facilities with your old gear that can't handle a 50 kW, even a 30 kW load on the existing system. They may solve some of that for you. And so folks that come over, they can charge there if needed, and those carports would run no matter whether the grid ran or not, meaning they'd make power for the facilities, and they'd also make power for the grid if needed, and work with or without the grid. That's the key. So I think probably the biggest challenge in almost every system besides the design challenges with microgrid is financing these things. They're a lot more complicated. It's not straight solar. We're not just selling straight power. There's energy services. There's time of use. There's energy arbitrage. We're able to make power, store it, dispatch it, feed it to the grid. In this case, we can feed it to the grid if we're not using some of it. In the case when they have what's called these day-aheads, when they let you know, hey, we're going to have an emergency tomorrow, we're not going to have an outage, but you know, it's called demand response. It's typically where they might turn your air conditioners back. Well, similarly, we can set the controls to dispatch, meaning that you could feed that to the grid as an option. That requires a subscription and additional work on that, but it is a way to to provide value. And the value may not be owned by Laguna Woods or anybody here. It may be owned by a third party who's trying to be able to help finance this for you. And I'll get to the next slide. So here's some of the options. We've typically go through this, but I think the challenge here is the way the things are structured. So the tax credit and depreciation is a very important part of any energy system that we put in, and those assets are able to be compensated essentially through those credits when they're owned. And that includes self-generation incentive, which is a battery incentive by the state. In this particular case, without the tax credit, 30%, or the depreciation, Likely financing a PPA is going to be the best way in my mind, or a microgrid as a service agreement. More and more funders are starting to kind of look at that service agreement in where rather than giving you a big savings, what they're really trying to do is give you resiliency at kind of what you're paying for electricity now. So there's a way to do that. It's a challenging, it's a lot of math, but essentially the process is doable. And so it just really, I think you really have to put a value on resiliency, because it's an unknown thing until you really need it. And then when you really need it, it's nice to have it. So in our system, the solar would charge the battery. The battery would be able to provide charging to the EV network. The battery would be able to dispatch to the facilities and keep those facilities running, and additionally provide arbitrage on time of use. In other words, demand charge management, which is also 30% of your bill or more.
Well, like 50%.
Okay, lots of design considerations. What does it look like? The HOA, getting through this process is also sometimes challenging. Trees, shading, we've had those issues before. Those we were able to overcome. They were able to trim those. Parking lots, the condition of those. Do we need to slurry them, add lines? What do we need to do? We're going to be boring or trenching, lots of things. And then the maintenance that is required to manage that. This is probably one of the most important things and highly overlooked. I think at the end of the day, anything that is operating like this, that performs a function of making energy and dispatching it, which has controls, needs to be really maintained often, at least as prescribed in a very very standard operating procedure manner, and also cleaned. So that's a key thing, and if a third party owns it, then it'll be on their responsibility to make sure they provide that. However, that being said, certain groups that we work with will make sure that they are able to provide that power during that need. In other words, some guarantees in there that power will be there when you need it. So it just depends on the finance group and who we're working with. It doesn't come free. Everything you add in terms of more requirements typically is added into the cost of the system itself. So the math challenge is trying to get all of that put together at a cost that is equal to zero, or not more than what you're paying for now for the added resiliency. And the preference would be to have some form of a savings in addition to the resiliency. So and an EV charging network. So there's a lot to it, and it's very challenging. I'm not going to go too much into this, but electrical panels, as you know, trying to add more chargers everywhere, that's probably not going to be an easy thing. You overload the circuit, then you have the utility asking you for a lot of money to put in a larger transformer. Some of you may be familiar with some of those things that we've seen in the past here. Installation, safety, disturbances, contingency plans, things of that nature. Those are also challenging once we get to the project itself. Logistical things of those natures, we normally handle that. And the planning and timing, this is important. I think the challenge, again, is really in the design engineering phase. Typically, a microgrid is designed in two phases. Phase one is just a very general feasibility, plus or minus maybe 10% or more. What do we think we can do with just the given data that we got? Feasibility two, however, this is a revenue grade feasibility study. This is something that we go through all the engineering designs. We develop the engineering designs, actually build a set of shop drawings. So we actually build plans. Those plans cost money. There's a fee involved in that. You have to pay for that fee. In other words, Laguna Woods, the organization, whoever is involved with those sites would actually prepay that. Of course, we would already have a financier willing to look at providing the value. But the reason for that is we have to get through the engineering to actually have something that is plus or minus 1 or 2% revenue grade model, which is a feasibility 2 study, at which point the financier can fund it, and at which point they would refund the initial deposit for the cost of that preliminary engineering and all the documents needed for the permit. Now, if the project did not move forward at that point, then the Laguna Woods Group would own the engineering and everything that was already performed in the scope up until that point. I'm almost done. Oops. Once the system's operating, these are very important. I talked about it. I'm not going to go through it, but you have a lot of things that need to be maintained, and a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at the designs and what they want and saving money on the front end and running RFP processes to grind the price, but they also have to consider the backside at how they're going to manage it. And I think having too many groups managing O&M could be a concern if you have one group doing one thing and the other doing another, and they're not communicating. So it's important. One group do, I think, most or all of it. Any questions on the process?
Yeah, Gene?
Yes.
I think, just to make it more clear for everybody, when you put a microgrid in, it's going to run 7 by 24 producing you electricity, and it's not just for emergencies.
That's right. It has a return on investment. It's working 24/7. It's providing power to the grid. It's not a backup diesel that just sits there until it needs to be used. So it does have a return on investment. It has a long life, and it'll provide shade in this case as well. And probably you can add security cameras and lighting if you want under those things as well.
And I assume the scale of a microgrid, a larger microgrid, is cheaper to build a larger microgrid than a bunch of smaller ones?
So a microgrid could be an off-grid cabin or as big as a city. I'm working on a project as a consultant doing 47 buildings in San Francisco that are all over the place, and they're part of a university. So in this case, in my mind, the microgrids, you could build a big system. I could actually build a big system so in one place and try to feed the power, but you have to physically have a microgrid on the site that you want it. In other words, I can't virtually net meter power, and if I'm going to send power from one microgrid to 5 individual sites, I have to actually feed power to those sites, okay?
Right.
Now, about a year and a half ago, there was an RFP out from the utility. This is SCE. I looked at this. It's part of their PRP, which is an issue here, as you know. They're having power quality issues because of San Onofre. They're really working hard at it. And so at the end of the day, we actually looked at taking a very big battery and putting it on a feeder and a bigger solar system and putting it on the whole feeder and trying to see if we could just island everything on the feeder. And so kind of looked at that and with a very large group, Lockheed, and they sort of wanted to back out. I think it was more complicated than they wanted to get into at the time. And frankly, I think SCE was fishing. So we backed away from that. But to me, the ultimate way to do this is each microgrid is really self-operational at each site. Each one has maintains its own controller, and then there's a master controller that controls the whole thing. So that's typically how you would operate a microgrid, and you really don't want to operate your own. You would rather have a third party run the whole thing for you and just get continuous power and get some free infrastructure. In other words, if we can make that work. That's the whole game. I mean, it's a financial engineering and technical engineering challenge.
Right. We had talked about, it didn't go very far, but we had talked about putting a large microgrid behind this building. And there's a building across the parking lot from this as a clubhouse. And because this is kind of going to become, at least right now, the nerve center for the community during a big crisis, that using that big lot to put in enough solar, enough batteries to essentially run continuously if it was possible. But we don't, so I'm saying on a scale like that, rather than building small ones for each of our separate clubhouses here or our facilities, I don't know if
that's going to be an analysis that's part of this process, is determining how many people are you going to try to feed into one building, and how are you going to manage everybody, assuming you had a lot of issues. And this, of course, is a nerve center. So I looked at that. I think at one point, that's not a problem to add that. Listen, the facility across the street that runs all your operations. I'm currently working on another project. It's a logistics group out in Hawaii, and basically we're electrifying their fleet and putting solar and battery on that. So essentially, it's just a matter of deciding kind of what you want to do. And so part of it's resiliency, and part of it is sort of reduction in greenhouse gas. And most of the I shouldn't say most, but there's quite a bit of push now looking at our transportation industry. And so when you're looking at your whole entire operations, you certainly could support every part of it. We just have to take a look at what you want to do on the side of just resiliency and what you want to do on the side of just being sustainable and operating well. And and to your point on scale, if you're looking at one microgrid just for this building, that's going to be this price. As soon as you start adding other facilities and more batteries and more solar, as you know, the scale then gets larger. There's more complications in kind of connecting all that, but it's really just, it allows the price to become better. So,
You got it.
yeah.
So PPAs, is there money, I assume there's a lot of people have a lot of liquid cash in this society right now, looking for places to invest it. What kind of, is your slide accurate at 4.5%, or are things any better than that?
I'll be honest with you, that slide is just a number.
Right.
What I'm doing is discovery. I think if you look at what's happening right now in the world, in my mind, I think you're going to have some really cheap money coming, okay? Because there's a lot of QE, a lot of money going in right now because of what's happening with the slowdown in China. The trickle down is pretty major. So I think interest rates, if you ask me, are gonna be. They've already clipped half a point. They're gonna continue to do that, and so I think that's just a matter of shopping it at that time.
You got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, Bert.
Yeah, are you aware of the bill in Congress right now to support cities who are desiring to go with a large microgrid for the city?
Very much.
Very much.
Yeah, I can't say, but yes.
Okay, so
There's a lot of challenge. There's a lot going on up north. I think let's just say PG&E has created a microgrid storm. I'll put it to you that way.
I assume they're not going to look at, although they may, nonprofits, but could the city of Laguna Woods qualify? Do you think?
I don't have an answer to that. I could tell you what Governor Newsom is looking at doing right now is two things. So there's a lot of money coming in right now under the SCHIP program for resiliency for disadvantaged areas. There's one for resilience. I think it's 1 cent a kilowatt hour. It may apply to this project. They're throwing money at batteries just to get them out there because they know they need them to manage this grid. It's becoming more and more challenging with the more solar they add. And then the last thing that's happened is the states put out an RFP. They really don't like fossil fuels. They want to go 100% green. However, the reality of getting to 100% green and solving an outage problem in a fast enough time isn't going to happen realistically. PG&E gets windy. There's just not enough solar and batteries I can get in there fast enough. These things take time. The timeline is a year. If we started today, we'll get it in hopefully, beginning of Q1 of next year, hopefully, So there's a lot goes to that, and a lot of grocery stores and Targets and chains they all go on and offline. So the whole cities are the government's looking to basically feed the nodes, the entire nodes of the entire cities at the utility sites where the large transformers are, the high voltage, and a personal group I work with is one of the RFP respondents. They're going to be building likely turbines up in Fresno and have those temporary things waiting so they can bring that in temporary switchgear and plug them in at those nodes. But that may happen next year, and it's not to be permanent. They don't like the fossil fuel, but it's to keep the outages from happening, to protect the state rather than worrying about the utility doing it.
Are you aware of any of the microgrids that are operating with fuel cells?
A couple I'm working on islands. It's not being heavily done right now. In fact, the transportation one I'm working on for a very large logistic group where the problem we're having is we may be making too much power at times that the building can't use and the trucks can't use. So we may be dispatching that into hydrolysis, into hydrogen. But I think that's a little advanced. So to me, just getting it operational on the grid is where it's at. It may get there soon though, but it's happening.
We've been looking to talk to a third party who would basically do the design, installation, operation, and charge us for the electricity that's generated.
From a hydrogen producer?
Well, whatever they decide and whatever they design, whichever they think. And apparently we're having a difficult time gaining their interest because the comment is, we're too small. Is that true?
There are quite a few comments when we do receive them. We have reached out to more than a dozen companies in regards to the microgrid. There's very little interest. Quite a few of them are looking for somewhere between 15 to 25,000 just for initial assessment. We did find Tesla's channel partner after reaching out to them numerous times. The quote was outrageous. You have an option between using a generator for approximately $150,000. The cost of the microgrid was about 25 times more money. You would have to place an enormous amount of money to do this. The generator that we currently have works for 42 hours. Additionally, there is diesel across the street at our gas station. And then we have a generator to make sure that's still pumping. You have it's not a doomsday prepper type setup, but you do have a sustainable system for the most part. In the event that something does happen, it's not going to be a horrific situation. Additionally, in my memory, we simply cannot budget for if you lose electricity for a month or two. I think there's going to be, it's just not something that's possible to budget for.
That's a pretty typical answer, so you're not surprising me at all. But I think, again, if you're looking at purchasing it cash, that's not, so again, this is really discovery. I think at the end of the day, if you didn't have to burn diesel at all, or even, buy much power from the utility, then you're getting the benefit of those two things. You're still getting power, but it's now coming from the sun and essentially, hopefully at no additional cost. So with your diesel backup, you're still not able to manage any type of, demand charge management on a day-to-day. Also, I think at the end of the day, I don't know how much diesel you store. It's good that you have your own diesel pump, and I think you guys have already thought about it, sounds like, because you have your own gas station. So as long as you can keep everybody else from taking diesel out of there and put it on lockdown for yourselves, then I think you're in good shape. Would that be the case?
Yes, essentially.
It's your gas station. You own it?
Yes, it is
Oh,
ours.
that's awesome.
Well,
So I think the long term sounds like you got some of that, thought about. So at the end of the day, it's just a decision as to does it economically make sense? Can we make it pencil? And in terms of is there value we can provide on the EV charging and some of those other things?
I think currently in this building, we run over 50% demand charge, which costing, I think, in the neighborhood of $200,000 a year.
We selected a program that is designed to do very large demand charges. It was determined by finance after a lot of analysis by their team. They do review it on a yearly basis. You're either going to have high rate charge and low demand, or high demand and low rate charges. There's no getting around it. You're paying Edison no matter what. I would love to pick and choose what part of the bill that we're able to pay. We could always switch it, and the demand charge will go away. Your electricity bill is going to be very, very close to what it is now. Unless we physically shut off more lights, that would help. But realistically, the demand charges are going to be here to stay.
Yeah, they will be here. I'm just wondering whether it's going to be as high as what we're paying.
Well, I don't want to get into what it's going to be or where it's going. I already know that. But I will tell you, you don't have to necessarily look at what I'm talking about as resiliency. If you decide, hey, backup power, we're going to use diesel, great. I would put a much smaller battery in. I would still put the solar in. I'd give you a PV charging network. I'd take care of your demand. I'd cut that out of this building, and I could give you a PPA. So either way, you get resiliency and no savings probably, or you're going to get maybe savings, or you just get savings and no resiliency. So because you have your own resiliency taken care of with all your diesel gas stations and your diesel backups, and I think we'd have to look at where they're located and what your islanding is. Because this building, and what about the rest of the whole operational facility, and what about all the people living here and all the questions I asked? I think you really need to take a really good look at your whole earthquake plan and make sure that the entire community can, there's a lot of things there that you have to address, and it's not just diesel and the electricity, it's
Oh, yeah.
more
I
than
think
that,
it's-
yeah.
we have to do a lot more planning, for instance, what load to shed in the event occurs.
Well, in the case of the diesel, you don't have the shed loads, right?
No, I think we
Those-
do.
those
because I
run
don't
the
think
whole
we have-
building?
I don't think we have the capacity.
Do
When the
you,
building
do
is
you,
fully
do you shed loads during your, when you run your diesel engine?
Yes,
Yes, they do.
yes.
They had a
I know we shut
transformer,
down
they had
an
a
elevator.
transformer blow a couple summers ago
Yeah.
that was connected to this building, and they had to shut off a couple of floors.
And the elevators.
Yeah.
And an elevator.
Shut the elevators
To make
off?
sure that
No.
the-
One elevator.
One elevator.
One elevator. So, yeah, they went to,
So in a long term, you'd lose half the building, basically.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are things you really need to, look, I'm just asking basic questions. We're going to get into a real deep dive, and I probably won't charge you whatever it is initially to just look at the energy savings portion of it. That I can do, okay? But I'll need the current utility bills. I'll do what I did before and just duplicate the effort, which is kind of what I'm doing now. It's just talking about microgrids and resiliency and earthquake preparedness rather than just energy savings on demand, charge management, and solar energy. And I think for you, it sounds like you may need a bigger charging infrastructure, so we could include that in there as well.
Is there anybody in the audience that has a question?
I have one before the audience comes.
Huh? Oh, I'm
When we
sorry.
were talking about a PPA, or power purchase agreement, for the third solar, I think there was a discussion of whether we could get the tax credit if we went to a third party for a power purchase agreement, and that they could pass that tax credit on to us. Is my memory correct? And if so, is that viable?
I think that when they looked at the actual articles and everything, how it was written, I think they were able to do that. I think they were able to prepay up to a certain percentage of that tax ahead as well. So there's certain things that, again, can be framed into a structured finance type of package. And again, there's also a PACE and a PPA structured type finance. So I think those three things, one is a PPA, one is a PPA with a PACE type of hybrid, and then the third is just a typical microgrid as a service, which is now being offered by a lot of funders because they realize that trying to do a PPA doesn't really constitute what are you doing with the battery, trying to layer that in. One is really about selling energy power at or below cost. The other is really about demand charge management, which is really those two kind of, they work together, but not financially. So typically the battery might be sold on a lease. But again, the challenge here is even on an operating lease, you're nonprofit. So ultimately the idea is to find that hybrid finance solution that gives you what you need, gives you either resiliency and less savings, or some savings maybe, or just straight savings and shade and PV and demand charge savings from all this. I probably knock out most of what you're talking about with that, yeah.
Yes, from the audience. Can you come up and use the microphone?
Yes,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
we do have a speaker. Richard Rader is
Right,
next.
you have to come up and fill out a card.
Am I coming down? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi, Dick Rader, 270D. I have a couple of questions. One is hospitals. They're the ones that really have to be concerned. It's really critical. How many hospitals are going with microgrids,
Every hospital is a microgrid.
including this one here?
Every hospital is a microgrid.
Okay,
Medical office buildings, not so much.
okay. And also, when sitting and listening to you, this would solve a lot of our problems, electrical charging stations for the cars, et cetera. However, if I understand it, I'm just going to ask you the question, the investor who invests in this, how do they get their money back? They're selling the electricity back to the electric company?
So they sell the power back to you. If you're buying your power at, 23 cents or 20 cents, and then at peak times you're getting hit with 30-cent power, what they'll do is they'll take the power that they're making, their total investment, they'll take the tax credit, they'll take the depreciation, they'll sell you power at a rate that's above what they're making it for. So they make money selling you power. And in this case, if you're going to have to add resiliency to that, then they're going to make money on the resiliency because they're going to put that cost in their system figure out what that is, what the maintenance is, fully burdened, and then they'll sell you that service as say, hey, I'll throw in the battery or whatever we're going to add for resiliency, and I'll just charge you a little more for your power. We're hoping that we can get the cost low enough so that doesn't cost you more than what you're paying for power now. And then the PV network would just be sort of a cherry on top if we can get it financed into the system, because that qualifies for the tax credit and everything else. So it's and as well, so you have, and there's options on the PV charging. Those can be either for free, or those can be for charge per kilowatt hour. So if that investor owns that whole microgrid, it could be where he agrees to sell you power at the utility rate or slightly above his rate. So he can make money on charging, make money on selling you power. And in some cases, if he's dispatching to the grid during a demand charge management issue where the utility has those happen any time between 10 and 23 times a summer, then he'll get paid a premium for that power that he dispatches from the battery, not used by the chargers of the building or the demand charge management system. So that adds to his cash flow.
You keep on referring to the tax credits, but tax credit is for a defined period of time, right?
The tax credit was something that was a mechanism designed by the U.S. government to help subsidize solar and energy systems, and so it's been extended to other parts of the industry, but it primarily covers a third of the cost of the system, and in this case, a third of the cost of the microgrid. If you add depreciation in, that covers about half, and so essentially it's just the status of your taxable, the way it is. It's just, this is very common. This is what we do on schools. This is what we do on municipalities. They don't typically buy their own system. They don't want to own it. Public companies typically don't own it either. They usually just PPA it.
So a concern I have is, because I invest sometimes, if I were going to invest in this, I'd want to know what my return is. But let me, before you answer that, here's my concern. Private company invests, but they own it. And what happens if they go under because they, a lot of things I could bring up? What happens then? Are we left out in the cold?
The funder we're choosing is probably going to be a very large public company. But I guess it's a very good question. You can ask that question. Typically, if they go out of business, that system is sitting on your property. So I guess at that point, there's an exit. Right, but there are clauses in there for that, just so you know. And typically, a receiver would take that, and then it would end up being owned by another third party who would then maintain it. So certainly, we can go through that discussion. But what I can tell you is that's been vetted by schools, by very large groups, that this is how we fund projects for any municipal, public entity, or nonprofit that has the ability to churches are challenging because they're not always, those could go out of business, right? But this is going to be here. So typically, that's how we would finance any type of public works this way.
And one last question, there would be protection so that if something, in the event that the ownership transferred to somebody else, that the restrictions as regarding electrical costs couldn't go up? I doubt that you could do that.
Those PPA providers typically go for a 20 or 30-year contract, so you're locked in as a customer to that.
Okay. Anybody else? Nobody else? Did you have a question?
I did. I just wanted to know how long the system will last.
The batteries have a 10-year warranty. We expect the price of batteries to drop like solar panels. They're already been dropping, but there's the challenges now with lithium. Mining the lithium has been difficult, I think, and I think what you're going to see is there's going to be pricing inconsistencies with what's going on in China. So we're expecting some disruptions in solar and batteries probably going into latter part of this year. Hopefully things get better, and then next year those prices may come down. But any kind of shortages, I mean, Tesla announced today they're shipping cars without the brain or auto drive in it. So at the end of the day, it's just we take a long-term approach, and the idea is it's a systems approach. So our vendor partners are already looking, a year ahead and making procurement arrangements to make sure that they don't have a full disruption. But it's a very challenging environment right now with what's happening in the world. I'll tell you that. Well, yeah, China's trying to do that, but ultimately, there's more lithium in South America what's that?
Lakes of it.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
there you go.
there's
So
cobalt.
we
is-
already have people that are very familiar with it. So it's just available. It just has to be mined, and so that price is sort of going to fluctuate like the solar panel silicon fluctuated in the past. It's going to be a a commodity item, which it is, and people are going to invest in it and supply and demand.
Yeah, the issue will be cobalt, not lithium.
All of those materials, nickel as well. They're
Yeah.
all challenging.
Yeah. Although that just recently announced that they can substitute potassium for the cobalt.
I think there's going to be some things with solid state batteries that'll probably do away with a lot of things, but we're not there. Or there.
Not there. That's
there,
correct. Correct. But progress is moving, being made. No other questions? Steve?
We have a limited amount of power generating capability at certain of the community centers with diesel generators. The diesel generator that feeds this building is underpowered. We have to shut off an elevator. We can only provide a certain load to this building under an emergency. You have to replace the generators, whether you use them or not. When you replace your generators, now you have to deal with AQMD because you have new standards you have to conform to. When we talk about that we have our own supply of diesel, we have a limited supply of diesel across the street for our bus service. When you use all that diesel, your generators stop generating. If you have a situation where trucks are not on the road delivering diesel, you have no generation. What we're talking about, I think, here in general, is that we don't have the capability currently to provide enough power in the event of a long outage, whatever that may be, whether it's due to the SCE cutting off the power because of fires or whatever it is. You know, I heard something here earlier today about where we have a low fire risk in our area. Well, I seem to remember a year ago, we were having conversations about the fact that we couldn't get insurance, that the people who wrote the insurance for the mutuals and GRF said, we're not going to write the policies for you anymore because we're afraid you're going to have fires here. And so we had to go out and get, 5 different insurers to 35 insurance companies to write policies.
35 insurance companies?
Yeah. Well,
Really?
$700 million worth of insurance, it took
Right.
35 companies.
Right. So, but I think what the community has to ask itself is what level of service it wants to be able to maintain, and how to, if you want to have more than you have now, how do you do that in a cost-effective basis? Now, I know most of the people sitting on this dais, and Gene knows this, we're relatively familiar with power systems, solar panels, batteries, generators, a lot of stuff that most people are not. More and more independent companies are forming and going into business to be able to build and design and install systems to sell power, just like you buy power from the utility. The advantage that they have is they can take advantage of the tax credits. So if they build $1 million system and they can save $300,000 from the tax credit, they put that in their model. The mutuals, being nonprofit corporations, can't take advantage of the tax credit. When we put solar in, we got no money back from tax credits.
Correct.
When Third considered doing a PPA before they install the system, the people who provide the money say, this is what we're going to build. This is what we're going to charge you for electricity. They build an escalator in it, okay? And you're assured your costs. You now have fixed costs for your electricity. SCE or any other public utility continually goes to the CPUC and asks for rate increases. Okay? You don't know what's going to happen next year, 2 years, or 5 years. When you have a PPA agreement, you know what your costs are going to be. You negotiate those costs. Also, when you have a PPA, true, the company who built it owns it, but you generally have the ability to purchase the system from that after so many years in time, and you're able to buy it at a discount from what you would have had to pay to build it yourself because they got the tax credits. This is a big thing. This is really complicated. And it really deserves serious attention because ask yourself this question. Something goes wrong, you use all your diesel, you can't get any more diesel, what are you going to do? I went to Costco on Saturday. I didn't buy disinfectant wipes. I went Sunday, they had none. They had no water, they had no paper towels, they had no toilet paper. All for the coronavirus, which we don't have a problem with down here. Yet. And I don't want to get into that deep of a conversation here. But the fact of the matter is, when you watch CNBC in the middle of the trading day, and they're showing you pictures of empty Costco warehouses, right? That breeds fear. You couldn't find a parking spot at the Costco parking lot on the weekend. I went back there yesterday. They still didn't have any water or paper goods or whatever it is, but they didn't have any rice. They didn't have any pasta. They didn't have any beans. They had frozen food and they had certain things,
you
okay?
understand where I'm going with all this.
I bought $500 worth of food,
There it is.
just in case. Canned chicken, canned tuna, canned salmon, frozen salmon. Somebody said, well, what happens if the electricity goes out and you don't have your refrigerator? I said, so I'm going to throw away some frozen food. I have some canned food. I have pasta. If I can boil water, I can make. I've got oatmeal. It's planning.
Steve, let's stay on.
So, but the thing here is,
We understand that there's a demand.
there,
There's a need.
when I hear, okay, we have things in place, I don't think they're sufficient. And yes, money is always a problem, but there are a way to finance things without having to go out of pocket and to reduce your overall expenses and know what your costs are going to be so that you're in a better position in case of an emergency. You have to keep an open mind, otherwise you're just going to be where we are now next year or 5 years from now.
The only thing I would add to that, and I don't want to go any further into it, is just look what's happening overseas. Maybe it won't be as bad here, but you should definitely consider those things that I discussed at the very beginning in terms of people kind of getting what they need and people taking that to heart here. We certainly can provide you any options that you want. I think it's up to you to decide what level of service that you want and would you like just savings or is resiliency important? And certainly what we do for a number of companies is we reduce the amount of diesel fuel being used with a microgrid because we would tie our microgrid to the diesel in the bus. That's how we would have to do this in a proper way, I think. I have to look at it. So ultimately, if you're burning diesel and you need to, the diesel is really backing up the microgrid. So just in case there's a lot of clouds or we can't do it, you consume a hell of a lot less diesel. Excuse me, you consume quite a bit less diesel than you would. And this is another way to save money. It's an ROI in an outage event, I guess you could call it that.
Okay, with that,
I'll leave it at that.
thank you, Gene. Great job.
The key is action.
Okay. Let's see. Department head update. Vilni?
I just wanted to provide you a brief update regarding Melrock. I know it wasn't on the list.
Say Melrock?
Yes.
Melrock's good. Use them.
We understand.
All right, so we have been working with them for the last few months. We did get the device installed, their IT network. There was a few issues with our firewalls and how everything's set up. It was eventually worked out. We have identified all of the building automation system-related devices. There's hundreds of them. We started reading data about 6 weeks ago. We have tagged all the data points. Basically what that means is, what does the data mean? It's throwing out a lot of codes, so it's a little bit difficult to translate everything. And we started reviewing the data and doing some preliminary analytics. I will be meeting with them tomorrow to discuss a little bit more about the system, and we will keep you up to date when our report is necessary, or the GRF board, more likely. That would be it for the department update.
Okay. Thank you. We are at the consent calendar. Do I have a motion with regard to the approval of this consent calendar?
I move that we approve this consent calendar.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Those in favor? Very good. Okay. On the reports, I think, Chris, you already covered Tesla.
I believe so. I've reached out to Tesla probably a dozen times in the last year for a variety of things. In terms of the adapter for your level 3 chargers, they do have it available directly from Tesla. It costs $450. There is very likely cheaper alternatives. When you're plugging in a very expensive device to a very expensive car, I would encourage you to probably use the manufacturer's likely more expensive device. They're currently sold out. I'm on the waiting list to find out. However, I don't have formal approval to purchase one.
I realize that.
Yeah.
You don't know if those alternative devices have the lock on it the way Tesla does?
I don't believe Tesla has a lock on it, but it does have a loop. And with a loop, I essentially could tie it to something.
Okay.
It may slow down somebody from stealing it, but
Right. You can't disconnect it from the car if you walk away with the fob. The only way, it's essentially the same as the cable you get with Tesla.
Yeah. It's not indicated on their website.
Okay.
Whether or not.
Steve?
Tesla has a proprietary adapter. They have their own charging network. If you plug a Tesla car into a Tesla charger and you walk away from the car, you cannot disconnect the cable from the car. The fob has to be in a proximity range in order to take it out. The adapter that's available from Tesla that people would be able to use with our DC fast chargers behind this building, when you attach the adapter to the DC fast charger and you take that cable and then you plug it into the Tesla, all that somebody can do is disconnect the union between the DC fast charger and the Tesla adapter. You will not be able to remove nor steal the adapter. So theft is not an issue. What could be at issue is someone's charging their Tesla in the back with the adapter, and somebody comes along and disconnects the DC charger. That's it. You don't have a theft issue. That's the way it works. I've been looking at this for 6 months. The Tesla adapter was available last week for 48 hours. It had been out of stock for months. It was available for 48 hours. I'm on the mailing list. 48 hours later, it's out of stock again. I would strongly recommend that GRF spend $500, including the tax, to buy an adapter, have it located at this desk at security, so that the over 70 Tesla owners who currently are in this village, as of last September by my count, can come here, go to the desk, sign in, leave their driver's license, borrow the adapter, charge their car. If they don't bring the adapter back, you have their driver's license. You know who the resident is. You can send them a bill. I don't think it's prudent for us now that we have almost $300,000 worth of charging equipment back there, which we only paid 25% for grants, that you ask every single person in this community who currently owns a Tesla or who's going to buy one, pay $500 each. You only have 3 chargers out there. Why do you need all these adapters? GRF should just buy 2, spend $1,000, make them available, and put the issue to bed. And that's my recommendation.
No, thank you, Steve. Okay. Moving on, I'm going to bypass the oral discussions unless somebody wants to have an item that they would like to discuss. Okay. If not, I'll come back to Chairman's remarks.
There,
Excuse me,
Chair.
John.
At one point, we're going to learn about the future of this committee, and I thought
Yeah,
number 14 was where that was going to happen.
That's exactly what I'm going to describe. This is the
Bert.
last meeting.
Bert, I'm sorry, there is someone who wants to speak on item number 17.
Oh, okay.
Did you want to do that now or after your member comment?
Okay,
Lynn Finkelor?
Are you going to talk about?
yeah. Is Brett here? Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Lynn Finkelor. I lived here 10 years. I put solar panels on my roof 3 years ago. I bought an electric car a year ago. I'm very happy. I'm constantly yapping to my friends to do something similar. So a friend of mine said, okay, $20,000, I'm ready. Let's put those solar panels up. And then he finds out that there's a $2,500 fee because the roofing people here seem to think that they require some kind of boots or something that the solar company says is not necessary. I'm not getting into that. But I just want to say there's a book called Drawdown that talks about things that can help our climate. And the 10th most valuable thing on that list is solar panels. Okay? So I want to sleep at night. I want to know that we are doing everything we can to encourage people. So somebody walks in and they're willing to put down 20 grand, and you're not getting that every week. Okay, there's only 144. Somebody told me that. I called up, find out how many solar installations there were for individual places here. Okay, so they're willing to put down 20,000, and then that $2,500 just pushes them into the no category. So my request to you is to take a look at this, see if you really think those footings are needed, or if they are, could you subsidize part of it so we encourage people to get those solar panels? Or this thing with the subscription, the residential subscription, sounds like maybe that really addresses the problem. So anyway, that's all.
Okay, thank you. Brett, do you want to respond?
It's the third only, isn't it?
To address the issue with the boot that your friend is referencing is actually a PVC boot that is required to tie into our PVC cool roof system. However, the mutual has a contract with Lettner Roofing, which would void the warranty given a member is to tie in incorrectly. And to avoid any issues with warranty and have any moisture intrusion events, it's been determined by the board that it is required for Lettner to perform that, and that's where that cost comes from.
Could we have subsidized part of that cost so that it doesn't discourage people?
That would be a question and discussion for the board.
I'd like to raise a point. Okay, 8 years ago, I put solar on my roof. Okay, I had tar and stone in the roof. I had understood that my roof was going to go to a white roof within 2 years. I'm contracted with the solar manufacturer, a fixed price to remove the panels when that occurred, and that was done. Okay, the white roof was installed, and then the solar company came back and put the panels back up. I had no difficulty. So, in essence, my stuff has been on the roof for about 6 years with the white roof, and no problems, no leaks.
The solar company did the install, or Lettner did the install?
Lettner did the initial, okay, at no charge. So I'm just wondering why it's $2,500 today and no charge 6 years ago. Steve?
If you didn't have a white rubber roof on your house when the solar was installed, Lettner didn't have to do anything. There was no additional charge.
Yeah.
My understanding of this issue, because I've discussed it at length with a lot of people, is that when you have a unit in Third Mutual, we're talking about Third Mutual now, we're not talking about United. When you have a unit in Third Mutual that has a white rubber roof on it, and you want to put solar on it, Lettner is the only company that can install the hardware on the roof for the solar company to then be able to install the solar panels. So basically, Lettner has a monopoly, and they're charging $2,500. The reason for this is that the mutual is responsible for the roof, right? So the mutual is saying, you want to put solar on, we're responsible for the roof. Lettner has to put the footings in so that we continue the warranty that we have with Lettner. In other applications, if you want to accept responsibility, financial responsibility for something, you relieve the mutual from the responsibility for repairs, right? This happens in other homeowners associations. You want to put something on your roof, the association says, that's fine. If there's a leak, you're responsible for all the damages, sign the waiver. That is a possibility, but this is a Third Mutual Board decision to make. And as it is now, as we've heard, it's an additional expense through only one vendor. You don't have the ability to go out and RFP with different roofers to say, oh, I'll do the same work for $1,000 and I'll give you the same guarantee. Because the mutual has this, Third Mutual has it, only Lettner can do the work. So Third Board has to take this up and make a determination whether they want to change their policy or not.
Can I provide some clarity on that? So there's two different warranties on our roof system on those. One is from Lettner, who we have contracted, and we have gone out with RFP for the best price. Lettner has continually provided us the best price. So that's who we're going with. They provide a 5-year warranty for us that they back up. Then we have a Mansfield, which is the manufacturer warranty, which is a 25-year warranty, and they back that up. However, if the person that is tampering or remodeling or whatever they're doing with the roof, Mansfield will not back their warranty if it's not a Mansfield representative that's doing it. In other words, they have their own installers that are certified by Mansfield. So if it's any other roofer besides a Mansfield certified roofer that penetrates that roof material, that warranty is now void for Mansfield. And Lettner will also void their warranty because they're not the ones that are doing the work, and they cannot guarantee that that provider is doing a sufficient job. And that's really how it works. However, if Third allows it and the resident wants to go find a roofer that's Mansfield certified, they may. I believe they have that opportunity. However, we do have a 5-year with Lettner, and that portion of it would be void. So their workmanship would be void. And you would have to go back to the installer for their warranty. That's just the way it works. So we have a really good deal with Lettner. You know, we don't want to void that warranty that they're providing us, which is a 5-year warranty.
Go ahead, Bill.
Just as a follow-up, this is the first time I've heard that.
Oh, okay.
What I've heard from residents and from solar installers is you can't use anybody but Lettner, period. No explanation. So if you've got a warranty from the manufacturer of the roofing, and you can keep that in force as long as any approved roofer, right, according to them, will do the work, then why is it people are only being told only Lettner can touch the roof?
Because Lettner provides us with a 5-year workman warranty. So if there is a problem with that, and it's not a material problem, then who's going to be responsible for that leak or whatever's happening at the time? Are we guaranteed 5 years from whoever that certified Mansfield, if someone goes out and gets their own certified Mansfield? Typically, it's a 1-year warranty workmanship. Lettner is providing a 5-year, and that's unheard of. So we have a good deal with Lettner,
But
and we don't want to void that warranty.
Understand, because the mutual is responsible for the maintenance of the roof.
Correct.
If you buy a brand-new car and it has a warranty and you modify the engine system, you lose the manufacturer's warranty and you accept responsibility for any damage or repairs that are necessary because you voided your warranty. Under all normal circumstances, a homeowner, if they have a warranty on anything, I don't care if it's a hot water heater or their air conditioner or whatever it is, if they sign off, I accept complete responsibility going forward because I made the modification. That's certainly done all the time. Again, to me, it's a third mutual matter. If an owner says, you're off the hook for any leaks that are caused by what's installed in the solar, they're responsible. If a resident installs a bidet on a second floor unit in United, which is a cooperative, United owns the building, that if they get a permit and it's approved and that bidet leaks and it causes water damage to the second floor unit and it comes down to the first floor unit and repairs are required, the mutual doesn't pay for the repairs. The person who installed the bidet does, right? You make a modification to a unit in United, you're responsible for the ongoing maintenance and the responsibility of all the repair costs, whatever it is. That's the only issue that I'm trying to bring up.
No, and I agree, and it's a policy issue, but the other hand is we would have to track everybody who has brought their own roofer in and didn't, and that is staff time. That's, you know, there's cost associated with chasing down people and money and things like that. I think they try to keep it simpler by just allowing Lettner to do that. Again, it's a policy. You're right. You can figure this out however you want. I'm just telling you why we do the things we do now. I just wanted to bring some clarity to that. But absolutely, if they decided they wanted to use another certified Mansfield installer, they could. It's really up to
If they want to accept
if they want
responsibility
to.
for damage.
Yeah.
That's their
But that's how it works.
Well,
Just
Guy, 5 years ago, actually 7 years ago, I wanted to put solar on my gravel and tar roof. And they told me your roof's going to be replaced in 2 years with a white roof, John Mansville. So my wife and I waited. And at the time, they were going to come and replace the roof. It's a flat roof. I coordinated with the solar company, Eric Sneekluth, and the roofing team. And they put the roof on. They put the anchors in for the racking on the solar. They put the cone-shaped.
right. That's the boot that we're
All of
referring
that.
to.
They did all of that and didn't charge me a dime. Didn't charge they may have charged the solar company, but they never let me know that they did, you know. But I never saw any charge for that. And they did it all right there It was done properly, it was coordinated, and if people are being charged $2,500 to put solar in, it's pretty well defeating the purpose of people who want to get solar. There's something wrong. Now, I don't know, so my question is it Lettner that's dictating the $2,500? Or is it Third Mutual Policy that's dictating the $2,500?
I honestly don't have the answer to that, but we can look into it. But
Yeah.
I don't have that answer for you right now, Bill.
Okay, maybe Brett does. He's going to walk up here.
There you go.
The price that Lettner gives is based off the plan submitted by the resident. So depending on how big of a job it is and how many boots it requires to tie in would then increase the cost.
You got it. So
It's case by case.
So they're now where they were doing it as kind of just as part of the job. They're now starting to charge the mutual for that work, essentially, and passing it on. They're passing it on to the homeowner.
Right.
At that point. Do you know how much per boot that they're charging to anchor?
I don't know the exact
Because I
rate
mean,
as that.
you have different sized installations. So if you've got 10 panels as opposed to 20, if it's just a flat fee of $2,500, that doesn't seem right either. Is there any way to give people that answer?
We can look into it. What we do is when we actually receive the plans, we work with the roofing coordinator, who then provides those plans and they provide the estimate. So we can obtain an estimate get an exact price breakdown on what it is.
Okay, so it's not just, as far as you can tell, it's not a flat fee.
No.
Everybody pays $2,500 no matter what size their solar installation is.
No.
And it's always on a flat roof we're talking about here.
Yes.
They're not putting that on pitched roofs.
No.
So, okay. And a pitched roof is a different deal. I mean, I know
Right,
some
all the
people
lightweight shingles
where they had to
is-
take all the, the shingles off and then,
Right, and that's written in the standard. So they are able to do a tie-in, given that they are licensed to perform roof work.
Right.
However, with the flat PVC roof, Lettner is required to do the install.
okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Brett, before you go, on the solar panels, is it only installed on single home units in third or multi-units?
Multi.
No, it can be, we have a standard for one-story buildings only. We have an existing standard, which is a guideline for two-story buildings, which requires going through the variance process, given that some of these buildings may not be able to have efficient solar panels installed if there's 8 units, and depending on how that's laid out, and they are prohibited on 3-story buildings.
Okay, with that, keeping in mind that if we allow for what Advisor Leonard would mention, that if we allow that owner to take ownership as far as maintaining repairs should it leak, if it's on a multi-unit, members that have altered their unit in any fashion or form, that member would be responsible for any of those, not including the one that installed the alteration, but all neighboring units that would be affected by the water intrusion.
That's exactly what you have in United, because it's cooperative, and United owns all the buildings, and when an owner applies for a permit for a change, whatever it is, they want to install something on the roof, they want to put in a bidet, they want to put in windows, doors, whatever it is, any damages that are caused to their own unit or their neighbor's unit, they're responsible for. And having been a former board member on United, I've sat in disciplinary committee hearings where people are told, you got to come up with $8,000 to fix this.
Right, and then given that, you understand how many of the residents don't carry an insurance policy.
Which is, again, something else that, it is what it is.
The cost for a member neighboring unit that would incur to replace alteration items that they've upgraded in their home due to somebody else's alteration is a burden you're asking neighboring units to bear.
You issue permits every day that do that, whether it's a washing machine installation in a United unit or a bidet or whatever it is. It's a variance process. Some are under standards, and they sign the releases. And you're absolutely right. And that's been the policy and continues to be. So I'm just saying, not everything runs the same way. And we have an issue in the village where people in Third who want to install solar, and they get a bid, they say, oh, I want to put in a 5 kilowatt system, and it's going to cost $15,000. I'm going to get a 30% tax credit, so I'm only out of pocket the $10,000, right? Then they go and sign all the papers, and the contractors come here to the permit counter, and they're told, oh, you're going to have to pay $2,500 or whatever the amount is that Lettner prescribes. Now that contractor, that solar contractor, has to go back to you, the applicant, and you say, what do you mean there's another $2,500 cost? And then the resident is dissatisfied with the contractor because they said, why didn't you tell me about this? When the contractor doesn't know what the policy is. You know, because when they're going out and giving the bids, it's like, oh, you want a system this big, here's how much it'll cost. And then they hit this bump. And then the residents are angry. And in some cases, it precludes people from moving forward because they said, it was going to cost me 15 with a 30% tax credit. I was prepared for that. I'll lay out 10. I'm not laying out 12.5. And the whole, and it takes months. And it's an unpleasant situation for everybody. So it needs some resolution, whatever third
Can I
determines that to be.
just point out that this is kind of a moot point? If it was decided by the third board, wouldn't it be a discussion for that board?
Yeah.
We're discussing something relentlessly that it's just not decided with this group of people.
Well,
Whether or not
can somebody, there's
Steve
third
or
board members here, can they
whoever's
put it on
right.
their agenda?
This is just
third
not
board.
the place.
It's actually architectural.
We
It
do
would
have
be
another
architectural
speaker
standard.
from the audience.
I didn't want to interrupt anyone, but like,
No, I hear you.
you know.
We have another speaker from the audience. Mr. Chair, do you want to take that?
Sure.
Okay, Richard Rader, 270D.
I just want to comment on what Steve was talking about. First of all, this is not just a third thing, it's also United. We have multi-story buildings. I'm going to tell you that I think that if anybody's going to put a solar panel on a roof with 8 units involved, that person, I don't know, even if they ask for permission, even if you showed that the present residents have insurance, it doesn't guarantee that subsequent residents will have insurance. And let me tell you why that's important. Personal experience. We were on the bottom, person above, without getting into how it happened, tremendous flood. Okay? They didn't have insurance. We didn't know that we were going to get paid. And if something happens and those people don't have insurance, it's unbelievable. You could get into a court case between people, and it's just a mess. You've got to be very careful, and it should go back to MMC, and you got to think this through very carefully as to where you're going to allow solar panels and how you're going to institute it so that other residents don't get harmed by what one person wants.
One more time, Steve. Keep it short.
If you allow people to put skylights, you have the same issue.
Right.
My point is, you allow people to put up skylights. Well, I'm just saying. Any roof penetration that you do, or any plumbing modification that you allow,
I'm going to put this one to bed. John, take it back.
We have an 800-pound gorilla. How about the future of this committee? Please, let's get to that issue.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. This will be the last get-together, last meeting of this committee. Effective yesterday, the GRF board took the steps to eliminate its participation in this committee. As I understand it, United, let's see, we'll be addressing this next week, and then Third will be addressing it the week after. So this committee effectively today is terminated.
We have a speaker from the audience.
Sure.
Richard Rader, 270D.
Yeah.
I implore this committee to continue its work. I implore this committee to wait. If you want to wait, you don't have to. to wait until you work out this research committee sort of thing. I think Sue wants to make some comments along this line. But I will tell you, as a VMS board member, for those who don't know, part of this had to do with the fact that we have a lot of different committees, and whenever you have a committee, you have to have staff. Okay? They're not upstairs doing the work that you are paying them for or expect them to be productive in terms of infrastructure and all the other things that they're involved with. So I think Sue would be able to answer who was the impetus behind this.
Yeah,
But
I'd
I
like
think
to
it's
go ahead and do
extremely
that.
important that you understand that this is not to eliminate the committee. It's to keep the committee, but allow you to have certain things. And one of the things is you can have whomever you want on the committee. You don't have to go through any machinations like that. And I think it has been worked out, but you probably can set your own charter, whatever you want to do, and it will allow you to have, Sue will go through it, I'm sure, as to how you'll have staff involvement when you need it.
Dick, be aware, I made a motion at the meeting yesterday, okay, that essentially this committee be kept in place until such time as a new research group or committee had been formed with its charter and approval and any necessary modifications to bylaws. That suggestion or that motion was rejected by the board.
There's nothing to prevent you from doing it.
There's everything that prevents me from doing it. We're no longer legal.
Let me speak then. I'm going to go ahead. I am sponsoring this committee. We seem to have a diverse opinions. Let me tell you the justification, and then we can work something out with this group. You say the present structure's not working. I hear that all the time, that you're not being heard by staff, you're not this, not this. I will try to find a way to make it work for you. I have been responding to GRF, which does not want you to continue because you do not follow the bylaws. On top of that, Third says they don't want to sponsor you. Staff says they do not want to deal with you. If we can't come up with a compromise, this group will disband, and we can only hope some other volunteers will be willing to do the work. I support the work you do and you are wanting to do. I have served on this task force. I have solar panels. I have an electric car. I'm forward thinking, and I believe the work you're doing, and that is why I believe in the work you're doing, and that is why I think we need to find a way to make this research group work. We are not trying to eliminate the energy task force. We are trying to make it work within the current system. My thoughts on research groups were that they didn't need to be board members in the group. You have non-board members in your group. This does not preclude you from having board members who are interested. This way, there doesn't have to be a bylaw change if you're a research group. It could be all resident group, all board members. There's no 3-2-2 rule. The directors would not need, a director would be needed as a sponsor. And I'm willing to sponsor this group. And Steve Parsons has been willing to sponsor the water, and I will sponsor the software as well. The change requested by VMS is that the research group not require staff resources. This year, we have asked staff to get their house in order, concentrate on efficiency and effectiveness as measured by KPIs and quality projects. They do not have time to look out into the future. We want this cleaned up. If the research group needs information from staff, they'll go to the sponsor, me, and it is my duty to evaluate the request, try to fill it. If this becomes burdensome, I will ask for the option to have the president of the research group have access to staff. But at this point in time, I'm willing to be the intermediary. Another concession to staff is that the research group not have badges for the second floor. The group is on their own logistically for minutes, agenda, and room assignments. The boardroom will be available to you. Chauvin is working on creating a site on the internet for the group to store their white papers. So you will have an internet place to put your papers. The group can to speak to vendors on our behalf, can make site visits to places of best practice. We'll try to have a small budget for visits. The group will reproduce white papers, which will outline proposals, including ROIs, etc. The sponsor will help the group find a home for this project. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, since there's no bylaws governing this, we can change it as needed. My hope is that the Energy Research Group will call a meeting in the near future, organize the work that they feel needs to be done, form subgroups if it's necessary, let me know what information the group needs, invite me to the meeting. Hopefully the current people on this committee will continue the current projects forward. One of the first projects you have is to what it would take on staffing to get your projects to work. I've been asked some questions and I'd like to answer them. Why are we excluding staff members from being part of the group? Because staff has requested they not be included and do not have to attend. Of course you can CC them on your meeting minutes and your agendas, so if they desire, they can attend. How responsive can we expect staff if we need data? The duty of the sponsor, this is the duty of the sponsor, and I will be very persistent in getting what you need. And that is what I'm telling you. We need to support recruiting skilled members from the community. Recruitment has begun. We have 4 people who have also volunteered to be on this committee, and we hopefully will highlight work which will attract more volunteers. So we have 4 volunteers that have already come forward saying that they'd like to be on this committee. Where will the files be kept? I tell you, we're working on that right now. When staff meets with vendors and work orders are developed, shouldn't the group have access? Let the sponsor know what information you need. I will try to provide a bit. I will try to keep you informed on other activities which may impact your projects. Who reports back to the respective MNC? Should there be one assigned member from each board? I will assist you in making this happen in an appropriate board method. So the burden is on me to get your things done, and I understand that, and I'm willing to take this burden because I believe your work is valuable, and I want you to keep working. But under the current situation, we want to get a new group started or new method started. So that is what I am here to do for you. And I really hope you'll work with me and continue the fine work you're doing. If you have any further questions, I'm quite willing to try to answer them now.
Please put my name in. I would like to be a member of that group.
Wonderful. Anybody else have a question?
It's not a question. My only comment is we have to clean up our language. In some places, you called it a committee. In some places, you called it a group. Just call it a group.
It's a group, a research group. Mm-hmm. Yes, Catherine.
I would suggest, we already have within all the bylaws and everything, clubs.
No, the club does not interact with staff.
Well, you're not going to be interacting with staff.
20 members to form a club.
But you don't have to have 20 members.
Yes, you do. You have to have 20 members. You have to go through recreation.
I would guess that's true. But if you call it a club, then you've got access on the internet, on the website. You've got a club name. You can begin to then organize yourself. And I think it fits better within the pattern. Admittedly, you would be the president, and so the president is the one who ends up making all the reservations, the one that's going to make all the contacts, because you already said you're going to limit people so they can't go to the second floor without proper permission and approval by you. I think if you try to keep it as close as you can within the structure that already exists, things will go a whole lot easier. You try to set something up differently, you're gonna, my own opinion is,
We're
Okay.
setting up 3 of these groups right now, and we're going to try them.
okay, I just saying.
I understand what you're
I've been through a
saying.
lot of this within the community.
Because
Anytime
we
you try
didn't
do
want to go
something
through
different.
recreation. See, this other way, it would have to go through recreation.
That's true.
And that, this
Catherine,
isn't.
if it becomes a club, we have to pay for the rooms, I think.
That's true.
Yeah, they
Well-
will not have to pay for the room.
Well, how are you gonna get that approved?
It's already approved.
The boards have agreed?
Yes.
Oh, okay, well, then, you know, if the boards have already agreed that there's gonna be no cost incurred, which is what we're talking about, that in itself is very unusual, and I don't know that it's covered in your bylaws. The bylaws don't allow, you know, they don't allow committees.
It's not
It's a committee, it's a research group, and it's,
That's what I'm talking about. If you're gonna do something like this, then you're gonna have to start modifying it. You gotta live by the bylaws. You can't just live outside the bylaws. A club exists. Clubs are defined. That's within the bylaws. You try to start setting up something differently, which is what we were having here with the task force and all these things, that's where you got into trouble. And it's not just because of staff support. I admit that it's costly. You got 3 staff here for 2 hours.
we have more than 3 here, unfortunately.
Okay, but I mean, yeah, I mean, when you start adding up a couple $100 an hour, including all the overhead costs, this costs us a lot of money. Clubs don't cost the community money. That's why there's a reimbursement for the use of a room. We're trying to make it so that other people in the community are not funding you. And I'm not disagreeing that you shouldn't have it. I'm trying to get you within the bylaws so that things go smoothly.
We have
for
looked
you.
through, we have talked with the lawyers and everybody, and this is perfectly legal to go ahead the way we're going.
And it
I
fits-
appreciate your
It
input.
fits within the GRF bylaw.
Yeah. It's not a GRF committee, it fits within the VMS bylaws. Okay, anything else? Any other questions? Any other input? I hope you guys will get together, figure out when you want to meet next time. You can meet next week. You're not on a monthly constraint. You can meet every 2 weeks, whatever you'd like, and I'll be there when you decide when you want to.
Who are these guys?
Everybody in the room. Anybody in the room. Anybody who wants to be on this committee is welcome to this group. It is not an assignment. It is a volunteer group. And I will work with Bert, the 4 people that want to be on here, we will get them involved.
Who are the 4?
I forgot to bring their names, I'm sorry. I will email it to the committee members.
What, can they raise their hand?
I invited them to this meeting. Are there any of the people who volunteered to be on the committee here?